Okay, so we're going to start reading chapter 10. And I want to make some predictions about chapter 9 that I didn't get a chance to say last time. I've said all this before, and then I had to go to the bathroom in the middle, so I'm saying it again just to save time. So, last chapter, I don't like Syed. Syed seems like he seems like the big bad that we're supposed to hate, and I want to understand his motives more because we didn't get much last time. But this other guy, I want to talk about him, Nihad Wasuf. It seems like, and I have to talk quietly because my aunt is sleeping in the room next door, so I'm going to try to talk quieter. Putting this closer so I can get closer. But it seems like he is using a fake name, and he was sent to rescue the American. The American, does that mean what I think it means? Because does that mean that he was sent to rescue Mitch? Because if that is so, that means we're back right after the prelude, which would mean Mitch has already been captured. Sorry. So that's my current theory, that this is back right after the prelude. Mitch is captured. My first thought when I realized this was, oh, the guy being tortured is Mitch. I don't think so. For two reasons. Number one, why would they think that he's coming to rescue the American if he's the American? And also, he went there to rescue two of his colleagues, and we don't even know if that's the same place as this, so I don't think it's Mitch. I think it's somebody else. Maybe Stan? Maybe a new character. Who knows? Let's get into this because I've already talked for 2 minutes and done nothing. Alright, this chapter is headed Lake Anna, Virginia, and I keep getting louder. It's in the middle of the night. I have to be quiet. It's 12:30 a.m. It's midnight. I have to be quiet. Okay. So, Lake Anna, Virginia. The doctor peeled off his leather riding gear and stood on the porch listening to Hurley recount the afternoon's events. He did so as passively as possible, even though his concern grew on several fronts. Interrupting, he'd learned that with Hurley was a bad approach. It was best to let him get it all out. Questions or comments could be perceived as a personal attack, which in turn would elicit a spirited counterattack, all of which the doctor knew was very counterproductive. Lewis had met the spook 5 years earlier. The Department of Defense had shipped his ODA team off to Pakistan to help the Black Ops boys from Langley, who were trying to train and equip the, Mujahideen. I'd assume J is pronounced Y in this, or otherwise it's Mujahideen, so maybe, I don't know. Let's start that sentence over. Oh, it's so long. The Department of Defense had shipped his ODA team off to Pakistan to help the Black Ops boys from Langley, who were trying to train and equip the Mujahideen in the treacherous border region between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Hurley, in his typical gruff manner, had expressed his amusement that the vaunted Green Berets were now attaching shrinks to their units. He wondered if Lewis was similar to the political commissars who were attached to Red Army units, which was not exactly a compliment, since the Communist officers were political appointees and in charge of Communist Party morale among the troops. This is like a foreign language to me. I'm gonna have to look up half of this afterward. Okay. Sorry. They were also known to ship off to Siberia anyone who did not show absolute devotion to the party. They were feared and despised by their own men. Lewis had read clean through the rough bravado of Hurley, and rather than take offense, he laughed along. As the weeks passed, however, Hurley began to consult the shrink with increasing frequency. Hurley soon learned the good doctor was a valuable asset to have around. Lewis, he found out, had a gift. He could read people. The doctor was a walking, talking polygraph. When Hurley was finished giving the afternoon's play-by-play, he did not stop to hear the doctor's opinion or let him ask questions. He moved headlong into what he thought needed to be done. I want you to sit down with him and run him through the ringer. Clear your calendar for the rest of the week if you have to. I want to know what the deal is with this kid. He's hiding something, and I want to know what it is. He's hiding a lot. As was his habit, Lewis pursed his lips and stared off into the distance while he thought about other possibilities. He respected, liked, and felt a sense of loyalty to Hurley, but he was not exactly a well-balanced, mentally healthy adult male. Kennedy, on the other hand, was possibly one of the most measured and thoughtful humans he'd ever had the pleasure of working with. Agreed. Before he did anything, he wanted to hear her side of the story. I'll clear my schedule for tomorrow, Lewis said, agreeing without really agreeing. Let's head inside. I'm starving and I need to use the bathroom. After Lewis had relieved himself and washed his face, they found Kennedy at the kitchen table, reading a file and picking out a plate of noodles. Noodles? You are really dreaming about noodles? I don't know why I'm like this. Lewis looked at the uninspired pasta and frowned. One of his passions was cuisine, and it pained him to watch his colleagues put so little effort into something so important. Without saying a word, he began searching the cupboards for something, anything that he could use to create a passable meal. Kennedy and Hurley shared a brief smile. Lewis stuck his nose into the refrigerator, and without bothering to turn around, said, Stan, would you be so kind as to fetch a bottle of wine from the basement? A Chateau Dominique would be fine. He took out a package of chicken and closed the door. Moving to the sink, he paused for a brief moment, and then said, You might as well grab two. When Hurley was gone, Lewis looked over his shoulder at Kennedy and motioned for her to join him at the sink. So, he said, Stan's not exactly thrilled with your new recruit. He's not the easiest man to please. Lewis turned on the water and began to rinse the chicken. With a wry smile, he said, He thinks you set him up. Kennedy rolled her eyes. This is the one you told me about, the kid from Syracuse? Yes. Lewis splayed the chicken open and let the water run through the crevices. You never said anything about his fighting abilities. Kennedy sheepishly shrugged her shoulders and said, I didn't know he had them. That's a pretty big thing to miss. Lewis glanced up at her. I'm not judging. I'm not proud that I missed it, but in the end, isn't it a good thing? Maybe. Maybe not. Kennedy explained what she knew about rap, which admittedly wasn't a great deal, but she pointed out yet again that a blank slate was not necessarily a bad thing. That they could mold him into the man they needed. She finished her verbal report as Hurley made it back up from the basement. She told me nothing. Lewis asked her to prepare a small salad while he went to work boiling noodles and slicing up the chicken and preparing a creamy white sauce. Hurley was left to open the red wine. While Lewis put the finishing touches on the main dish, Hurley and Kennedy started up again. They volleyed back and forth, each one putting forth his or her version of what had happened and how the other one had screwed up. Like any good shrink, Lewis was a good listener, and he played his part. It helped that these two were rarely boring. Hurley was a once-in-a-lifetime patient, the kind of man who was so outrageously entertaining that you sometimes felt you should pay him rather than the other way around. Oh my gosh. Sorry. That made me laugh for no reason. Sure, there was a flourish of exaggeration here and there, but Lewis had witnessed several of his exploits firsthand and knew the stories to be, for the most part, accurate. Kennedy was very different. There was no cussing or anger or animated hand gestures accompanied by thespian-like facial contortions. Thespian-like. I don't know why this is so funny to me. There was just a calm, analytical, intellectual way about her that put you at ease. So basically she's the opposite of Stan. Why is this so funny to me? I love it. Anyway, okay. Her answers were never rushed and almost always thoughtful. She did not participate in personal verbal attacks or attempt to sway opinion by exaggeration. Wildly different in almost every way, they did share a few qualities that served to exacerbate the situation. Both were deeply suspicious of everyone they encountered and did not find it easy to admit they were wrong. On top of that, their long history and familiarity served to bring both of the best and worst qualities to the surface in a very raw way. Lewis would never admit this to them, but it had become one of his great clinical joys watching these two argue. It was verbal combat at an Olympian level. Verbal combat at an Olympian level. The table was set, the wine poured, and the food dished up. Kennedy picked at her salad while Hurley and Lewis devoured both the salad and the chicken and tomato fettuccine. Tomato? When have I ever said tomato? It's tomato. Tomato fettuccine. Lewis ate in near silence while he watched the two adjust. He interrupted on 3 occasions, but only for clarification. When he'd cleaned his plate and poured himself a second glass of wine, he pushed his chair back and was ready to give them his take on the matter. One of the things they had decided at the formation of the group was that they wanted Lewis to have full operational input. Hurley was in charge, but there was some apprehension in Washington over his cowboy attitude. Hurley, to his credit, understood that he had certain weaknesses. Rather than cop an attitude about Lewis's role expanding beyond weeding out the whack jobs, Hurley had told him, "I don't want any bullshit, PC." PC? Bullshit PCs. Oh, wait. I don't want any bullshit PCs shrink stuff. You're paid to voice your opinions, not give me an endless stream of what-ifs. With that in mind, Lewis put his glass down and said, 2 mistakes were made, and you both know what they were. Kennedy nodded, while Hurley said, I can think of one. Her not doing her due diligence. What's the second one? You can't think of a single thing you did wrong today? Lewis asked. I'm not perfect, but this one's not my fault. Hurley pointed at Kennedy. I'm busier than shit trying to see which one of these boys has the right stuff. I'm not responsible for the turd she jumps in my lap. Lewis was suddenly resigned to the fact that he would have to box Hurley in a little tighter. Clearing his throat, he said, We're left with 2 options. Either this kid is really good, or you're losing your step. Lewis took a drink and asked, Which one is it? Hurley's jaw tightened. I haven't lost a step. In a slightly embarrassed voice, he added, I just underestimated him, that's all. And that's what worries me the most, Lewis said in an accusatory tone. Don't worry, I won't let it happen again. I'm afraid that's not good enough. Hurley lit a cigarette and casually said, Let's not make this into something bigger than it needs to be. Bullshit, Lewis said with genuine fury. Come on, Hurley said, trying to shrug the whole thing off. Don't come on me. You effed up today, and you effed up big time. Anytime I say that, it's the F word, by the way. Obviously. Kennedy leaned back, her eyes wide, unable to hide her surprise at Lewis's strong condemnation. Let's not overreact, Hurley said easily, trying to take some of the heat out of the conversation. Overreact? Lewis leaned forward. I'm not sure it would be possible to overreact to the situation. And what is really bothering me is that you know it, but you're too pig-headed to admit it. It's not the end of the world. Lewis's indignation was growing with each denial. You're supposed to be infallible. These guys are supposed to fear you, loathe you, hate your freaking guts. But the one thing they are never supposed to do is lay a shiner on you. Lewis pointed at Hurley's swollen eye. And they definitely aren't supposed to beat you, especially not 5 minutes after they've walked through the gate. He didn't beat me. Well, that's debatable. From what I've heard, he had you beat, and the only way you got out of it was by cheating. Yeah, well, life's not fair. At this stage, Stan, these guys are like young pups. You know that. When we lay down the rules, we can't break them. It sends the wrong signal. True. Hurley leaned back and stubbornly folded his arms across his chest. I was suckered into this thing. I'm not sure you were, but for a moment, I'll go along with you. Lewis paused briefly and then said, You're not supposed to get suckered. You're supposed to run these dogs until they're so tired they can barely stand. You're supposed to watch them go after each other, get a sense of what they're capable of, and then you're supposed to bring them into that barn and smack them down, just like when you and I went through boot camp. This is delicate work, goddammit, and you know it. There's a reason why we do things the way we do them, and your ego has no place in the decision process. My ego has nothing to do with this, Hurley shot back with a sour look on his face. I just let my guard down, that's all. No, Hurley shook his head. I'm inclined to agree with Irene on this one. You still see her as a little girl, and you don't give her the credit she deserves. She shows up with this new recruit, and because he doesn't fit into your little box of where these recruits are supposed to come from, you decided to skip steps 1, 2, and 3, kick his ass, and send him packing. Lewis sat back, took a drink of wine, and then in a calmer voice asked, Does it mean anything to you that Thomas signed off on this? Lewis was referring to the Deputy Director of Operations. Okay, now I'm really confused. I thought Lewis was Thomas. What? You know what? I'll figure it out later. Embarrassed, Hurley said, I didn't think of that. Do you understand the situation you've created? Hurley didn't react at first, and then very slowly he began to nod. Kennedy was feeling better about her position, but she wasn't entirely sure what they were talking about, and asked Lewis, What do you mean by situation? These things have a way of spinning out of control, Lewis said. One recruit has some success putting a shiner on an instructor, and all of a sudden the rest of them think that maybe they can take a shot. That these guys are human. Throw in the fact that Stan here had to cheat to avoid losing, and we now have a potentially dangerous situation. How so? Kennedy asked. Do you think it's in our best interest to train your boy, send him off, and have him decide that when things get tough, the rules don't really matter? Hurley now saw the point. Kennedy now saw the point. Sorry. Hurley mumbled to himself. What do you want me to do? You're going to get the hell out of here for about 5 days. I want you to heal up. You let me and the others run these guys down. I'll get a better sense of this rap kid and his full potential. And then you come back here and you head into the barn with him and you beat him fair and square. And if you can't beat him? Kennedy asked. Lewis and Hurley shared a look. They were in uncharted waters. Lewis finally looked at Kennedy and said, That would be a nice problem to have. Oh my gosh, I don't know why I laughed so much at this chapter, but I'm confused because Tom Lewis, wasn't he Kennedy's boss? There's another Thomas? Is that what I'm getting? Is there another Thomas? I mean, there's Thomas from the Maze Runner, but that's a different Thomas entirely. There's Thomas, my brother, and that's not who they're talking about. Jesus Christ. Okay. Well, that took yeah, that was a good stopping point, I think. And I can put this in its own video because of how long it was. It took 20 minutes to read. Well, 15 if you count the talking I was doing. But I hope Hurley can can actually kick Mitch's ass. Otherwise, it's gonna be a little bit awkward. He's gonna come back and have to beat him fair and square, and then Mitch is gonna completely take him over again. Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and get on with the next one because I want to read as many of these as I can tonight, because I have to work 4 nights in a row now this week. That's gonna be fun. So I'll see you guys in the next video.